Yeah, I just want to say something. Racism is tantamount with people with slavery bias. It's about generational history. So forget that slavery has always been there in the Middle East. It started through the trans-Saharan slave trade, where slaves were taken away from West Africa in the 7th to up to the 20th century. Slaves were taken away from West Africa up to Iran, to Iraq, far into those deep interiors. Africans were enslaved. About 6 to 10 million Africans were taken away from West Africa to these areas for forced labor, as concubines, as laborers, as indentured slaves, you know, even as eunuch, people who serve their wives and so on and so forth. That tells you how Africans were exposed, to hard labor. About 50% of those who went on this route, never made it up to those areas because they died on the road from hunger, from uh, hard, difficult weather and so on, harsh weather conditions and so on. Much about the trans-Saharan slave trade, which was carried out mainly by Arabs and Berbers, who were in charge of the slave routes. You know, I show speed interview with a Palestinian youth in Gaza, and I was trying to encourage him, support him, trying to make him feel okay, and telling him things will be okay in regards to the inhuman treatment that Gazans are going through. But the guy simply just told him from the translation that Arishospe is actually a great slave. That shook me, actually. I just couldn't imagine it. Even Arishospe was actually looking at him. Oh, what was this guy saying? What the fuck? But the truth is, you can't blame him. History is the way of life of a people, passed on from one generation to the other. To all call a fellow human being a slave in the 21st century, that tells you the mentality that even you going through oppression also have an oppressive tendency. So most times when you look at people, I feel pity for them actually as Palestinians because they are going through a lot. But in that a lot, they are so oppressing others because you have 11,000 black Palestinians who are going through oppression and discrimination as we speak. Nobody talks about them. A place where you have population of blacks like that, but the fellow Palestinians who are of lighter skin see those people whom they grow up with as slaves. And that's why the guy could confidently call Arishospe a great slave. I was just laughing when I was watching the interview and when I was listening to both of them, I felt so embarrassed and I said, could this still be happening in the 21st century? So for Africans, we tell ourselves, that slavery, we talk more about the trans-Atlantic slave trade, that started in the 16th and 19th century when Europeans came to Africa because they needed people to work in their plantations and so on and so forth, where about 10 million slaves were taken out of Africa. And many of them died through the Middle Passage, through poor health condition and through harsh condition on the sea. Many died in the plantations in America. Basically, we are at the forefront, of this oppression and exploitation, human degradation. Africans, black people have suffered all through the ages. Why are we always the victim for this exploitation? Why? So it's time to talk about it. So whenever we talk about slave trade, we talk about transatlantic slave trade, what the white people have done, this, that. Why are we also not talking about what the Arabs and Berbers have done to West Africans? It's time to tell people the history that most people don't talk about. That trans-Saharan slave trade was one of the most horrendous slave trade that ever happened to the black man. Try and know your history. Asking says so. Thank you.